Hello and welcome to another episode of the djproject Criterion Collection. And here we're going to talk about Spine 317, The Tales of Hoffmann, directed by Michael Powell and Emeric Pressburger, 1951. Now, interestingly, I saw this before I saw The Red Shoes. And the first time I saw it, I liked it, but there was more of an ambivalence to it. And then I tried seeing it again recently, and I still feel very ambivalent. And which is really, it's kind of sad in some ways, because there are some aspects to it that you would think would make it very, very appealing. And what I mean by ambivalence is basically, it basically describes that I don't have this overwhelming love or this intense love where I feel like, oh, this is my favorite film, or this is like my go-to film. This is not like, say, Ron or Metropolitan or Kicking and Screaming. This one I just feel a little bit of ambivalence towards it. I can appreciate what went into it, certainly, and I can appreciate the individual elements, but there's just something about it that just does not really quite sit well. Anyways, Tales of Hoffmann is Tales of Hoffmann. This is the Offenbach opera, based on the stories of E.T.A. Hoffmann, and it's translated into cinema, and not in the it's a stage performance and you have a locked camera and it focuses on the stage, or maybe there's some close-ups here. So it's not performed on stage. It actually is constructed as if it were a film, and which meant that imagination unbounded. Basically, if you take The Red Shoes, if you take that ballet sequence, that 30-minute ballet sequence in the middle of it, and just take it out and then extend it into a feature-length film, that's basically what the Tales of Hoffmann is. And so maybe one of the problems with it is that it does feel like it's retreading the same water, as it were. Although, to their credit, this was something that wasn't really pursued as much, this notion, and particularly with established classical repertoire, and particularly with opera. Usually, again, the typical approach, and it's still the typical approach, I might say, with opera, and I would also include like other vocal works, is to basically film a stage performance. Whereas this, we're talking about a set design that is meant to evoke that story and sort of set the mood and work with the music. They also included in an element of dance, which then connected with the cinematography, you have a camera that dances. And those, I find that those are the best ways to capture dance on film, is when the camera acts acts along with the dancers, or is its own dancer to capture that sense of movement. And so yeah, it's influential in and of itself, that approach. And interestingly enough, I found this out. Our favorite corporate mouse, Walt Disney. Usually when Disney's talked about it in an artistic sense, yes, he is talked about in an artistic sense, it's usually within the realm of animation. And often it's either how similar you are to Disney or how much you want to avoid looking like Disney. But this is an example of Disney influencing another medium. A lot of what you find in the Tales of Hoffmann, and I think to some extent you can see this in The Red Shoes, although I'm not entirely sure how Fantasia was shown. I don't believe that Fantasia was shown outside the United States. Or maybe it had a better run, or I don't know. I don't know how they would have known it, but there is an element of Fantasia. The point is, there is an element of Fantasia in the Tales of Hoffmann. Particularly the Nutcracker Suite, the way everything is designed and the transitions within a set, going from one general spot to another, and it's supposed to give you a sense of space, even though it's all within a studio. So yeah, so yeah, I mean, I'm familiar with the Offenbach opera. In fact, I played for a long time I played cello, and I have played the Barcarolle movement, the I've played that before. So I'm very familiar with it, and again, I haven't seen all of their filmography, but I like Powell-Pressburger. I really liked The Red Shoes, and I really liked Black Narcissus. But this one, it just doesn't really strike me as much. And maybe the other reason why is that this was made at a time in the history of the Archers, the company that Powell and Pressburger formed to kind of represent them. Beforehand, they worked with J. Arthur Rank, and that's where Red Shoes and Black Narcissus, among several others. Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, I think, was made during that time. I Know Where I'm Going, I think. Anyways, so they were normally working with them, and then Alexander Korda, I think, either reclaimed or revamped his own production company, London Films. And when the opportunity arose to change partnerships, they decided to go with him because it was Pressburger who knew Korda, and they thought that there could be a little bit more freedom and more control over their projects than they were under Rank. But ended up being not as a fruitful relationship as possible. And I think this is probably the more successful of the films that they made along with London Films. There are a few others that came about that weren't as well received, and that eventually led to the dissolving of the Archers partnership. Very amicably. They were still on very good terms, so there was no acrimony at all between them. It was just the nature of business, and I think maybe both of them, they felt like, okay, I think we've done enough. I think we've made our point, or I think we've done all we can, and let's just go on and do other things, like making Peeping Tom. But yeah, there is a. So yeah, I mean, it just comes back to, and maybe this is the other thing that probably does it, is that while this is the Offenbach opera, this actually uses an English libretto, and there have been some comments made about the translation of it, that it's not the best English translation of the original French, which, interestingly enough, Hoffmann was from Germany, but oh well. It's all in translation. But and I'm wondering if that was maybe part of it. It's just hearing a English rendering of, and English is not the most operatic language. And maybe it's just because opera stemmed from Italy, and we always have that association with not just Italian, but any Romance language. But there is something about Romance languages that lends itself well to music. I think it's because there seems to be more vowels and less consonants, and it lends to singing, whereas English seems to be mostly consonants. But yet Russian seems to work too as a musical language. I don't know. Maybe I don't know if it's just I don't know if it's the diphthongs that does it, or the syntax, or the way the vocabulary, or the way the words are constructed. I don't know, but English is not the most. It's not. It doesn't lend itself easily. It's not to say that all English operas are bad. I mean, you had Henry Purcell, for instance, and there's more contemporary ones. Maybe it's just a translation that doesn't quite work with it, and maybe, and this is something that I've also learned somewhat directly and somewhat indirectly. When you film music, when you set things to music, well, first off, music kind of plays by its own rules, and also music has to do a lot, and particularly if you're using it in a dramatic sense, where you're telling a story, the music often serves as the backdrop. It illustrates the scene, and actually a really good example of this would be like Schubert's Winterreise. The piano has to illustrate for you the forest, and it has to illustrate the weather, because you're not seeing this. You're just hearing a performance. So the music has to translate a sensory experience, where it has to give you a visual impression by oratory means, and so the music ends up being longer. Whereas if you just show it, you can see that there's a forest, and it's in the midst of winter, and snow is blowing, and the guy is really, really depressed. You can see all that very immediately. You don't need to have the music, because that function is already served. You can see it. You can see it for yourself. And thus, the music can feel a bit redundant. It will certainly be redundant in that respect, but it can also make it feel longer than it needs to. Though I will say that I think because it is an opera, and with opera there is a sense of movement. And you almost have to, because opera is a synthesis of music and drama. The music does move, and you do have, but I think there are some kind of lull moments where it feels like, this could be a little bit faster or something. But so sometimes the merging of the worlds don't quite fit. But again, it makes it sound like it's a bad thing. No, it isn't. I think this is what I think I've said this before. This is the kind of thing that notches it down a couple of stars. If I were to give this a 10 star, if I were to rate this on a scale of 1 to 10, this is what brings it down a couple of notches. And I understand that this is something that's inherent in. This is using the opera. This is using an English translation of a French libretto. And there's only so much that you can do. But I can definitely appreciate what it was and what it was trying to do. And it's something that I think you don't see as often as you would like. I mean, actually, that's not true. I know what came out at the end of last year. So there you go. Les Mis is actually a really good example of this. In fact, that's how I've described Les Mis, the 2012 film directed by Tom Hopper and based on the musical, is basically taking the musical and setting it into a historical setting, or a more realistic historical proscenium, as opposed to just filming it on stage. And that is what, again, I think that's what makes it really interesting. I haven't seen it yet. I know plenty of people who are bigger fans of Les Mis than I am, but I've seen enough from the trailers, and I've heard enough feedback to confirm my suspicions. And at some point, I would be interested in seeing it. But it's the same kind of idea. But whereas this is much more fantastical, because the stories themselves are quite fantastical. I haven't got too much about. I'm probably going to do a lousy job summarizing the plot. This is why I defer to Wikipedia for more clarifications. But the way that the film is structured, and because it's more actually, there are some slight differences in what they did compared to the opera. The opera itself takes three tales of love from Hoffmann, and these are all examples of unrequited love and also sacrificing love for the sake of art. And these are three different tales of it. But the framing device, the general framing device, is that Hoffmann, late in his life, he has fallen in love with a ballet dancer, played by Moira Schreier, who was also in The Red Shoes. In fact, that whole scene in the beginning, and her character was created pretty much for her to show off her dance, to show off her dancing. She also plays one of the women in one of the tales. And I forget for the life of me the first one, whatever the first one is. But anyways, I just should do a better job preparing these things. Anyways, and she's the latest love interest for Hoffmann, and then after the ballet performance, he goes into a tavern and he proceeds to tell him these tales of past loves, and that's where you see the sequences. And then it all ties together at the end, and I think they're now stuck with each other. I think she doesn't quite prefer it because he goes into the tavern. But at any rate, so that's the slight modification. But it's all done to. I think it does help tie the scenes, tie the tales together more seamlessly, I guess. So. But yeah, like I said, this is, I personally feel a little bit of ambivalence to it. Maybe my mind will change. Maybe I'll see something. Maybe I'll get over certain things. But I can certainly appreciate. I don't think of this as a bad film. I don't think this is the worst thing ever. I've seen plenty of those to know what a true worst film looks like. And this is definitely not it. But it's not the film that sort of pulls me into it, compared to, say, Martin Scorsese, who is, that was actually his first window into Powell-Pressburger. And, to name another unlikely fan, George A. Romero. Yes, that guy. He loves this film. And I'll kind of wrap this up by saying that yes, this is another out-of-print title. Yes, this is all Studio Canal's fault. I don't know if it's going to be available, but really, I would say that for me personally, you see The Red Shoes, and keep in mind that it's, like I said before, it's taking that ballet sequence in the middle of Red Shoes and then making it into its own feature film, but obviously using Tales of Hoffmann, and that's really what you get away from it. It's a filmic opera. It's a cinematic opera, or to actually use a term that Powell and I think also Pressburger too used, a composed film where all the elements worked, and it. I guess this is a more English way of saying Gesamtkunstwerk, without pissing people off. But anyways, and actually, film in general, I do feel that film is naturally a Gesamtkunstwerk, because it is a synthesis of many different art disciplines working together to form a whole. So. But again, this is just my opinion. I would say that if you love music, particularly classical, if you want to see it done in a different way, give this a spin. Maybe you'll like this more than I do, but like I said, you'll get the same idea of it through watching The Red Shoes. And again, Tales of Hoffmann is out of print, so it's maybe fairly difficult to come by. But you get the same sort of idea from watching The Red Shoes. So it is one of those. Yeah, it's an annoying loss, but it's not as big of a loss as compared to, say, Ron. So So there you go. So there you go. Tales of Hoffmann. And until next time, take care.